My girlfriend said I was paranoid, until I recognized her voice in someone else's voicemail. The voice on the voicemail was a ghost, a digital echo that shouldn't have existed. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of grey, drizzling day that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. I was in the small, soundproofed booth of the recording studio, waiting for the client to finish his coffee break. My phone buzzed against the cold metal table, a number I didn't recognize. Thinking it might be a new gig, I pressed play on the voicemail notification. The audio was tinny, layered with a hiss of a bad connection, but the conversation was clear enough. Point 2. Just make sure the package is secure, a man's voice said, low and urgent. We can't afford another slip-up. She's good at disappearing, but I know her tells. Then, a second voice answered. A woman's. It was her. It was Chloe. My Chloe. The sound of her voice hit me like a physical blow, a familiar melody in a terrifying new key. She was supposed to be at a yoga class across town, yet here she was, a ghost in the machine, her voice crisp and clear against the static. Relax, Mark, she said, and the casual, dismissive tone she used with me every time I voiced a concern was there, sharp as a shard of glass. The storage unit is clean. No one will find it. Just handle your end. The line clicked dead. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, the silence in the booth suddenly deafening. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sterile quiet. I played it again and again. It was unmistakably her. The slight lisp on hers, the way her voice dropped a fraction of a note at the end of a sentence. It was a voice I'd fallen asleep to, a voice I'd trusted implicitly. Now it was the key that unlocked a room of horrors I hadn't known existed. For months the cracks had been forming. Small things Chloe always had an explanation for. The scar on her wrist, she said, came from a childhood fall, but which looked suspiciously like the neat line of a surgical incision. The way she never talked about her family, deflecting with a wistful smile, and a story about being an orphan that felt too polished, too rehearsed. Her phone, which was always face down, always on silent. I just hate being tethered to the world, she'd say, her fingers brushing mine away if I reached for it. I want to be present with you. And I'd believed her. I'd let her paint me as the paranoid one, the overthinker. Leo, you're doing it again, she'd sigh, her blue eyes soft with a manufactured patience that made me feel small and irrational. Why are you looking for problems where there are none? Don't you trust me? The question was a weapon, and I'd always lowered my guard, apologizing for the unease that coiled in my gut. Now, in the aftermath of that voicemail, the unease was no longer a whisper. It was a scream. I left the studio without telling the client. The rain had picked up, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon and sodium. The apartment we shared was only 10 blocks away, but the walk felt like a journey into a foreign country. Every familiar storefront looked different, every passing face a potential threat. I used my key, the metal cold and familiar in my hand, and stepped into the space that had been my sanctuary. It was immaculate, as always. The scent of her jasmine perfume lingered in the air, a sweet, cloying fragrance that now felt like a chemical weapon. Her favorite cashmere throw was draped over the arm of the sofa, a perfect, elegant fold. It was a stage set, and I had been its unwitting audience. Her laptop was on the kitchen counter, open. She never left it open, a rule she'd said, a habit from her old job in data entry. You can't be too careful with information. I approached it slowly, as if it were a sleeping animal. The screen glowed with a document, half written. It was a resume. Her name at the top, Chloe Vance. But the work history was for a woman named Eleanor Reed, a marketing executive in Chicago, a city she'd told me she'd never visited. My blood ran cold. I scrolled down. The references were names I didn't recognize, numbers with Chicago area codes. The photo in the corner was her, but different. Her hair was shorter, styled more severely. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I heard the click of the lock on the front door. My breath hitched. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart seizing in my chest. I moved away from her just as she walked in, shaking rain from her hair. She looked beautiful, effortlessly so. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, her eyes bright. She smiled at me, a radiant, perfect smile that now looked like a mask. "You're home early," she said, her voice the same one from the voicemail, but now it was a performance, warm and loving. She came toward me, her arms open for a hug. I flinched. a tiny involuntary movement. Her smile faltered, just for a second. "Is everything okay, Leo?" she asked, her head tilting. "You look pale." I couldn't speak. The two versions of her were at war in my mind, the woman who loved me, and the woman who spoke to a man named Mark about a secret storage unit. The woman whose name was Eleanor. I wasn't feeling well. I managed, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. The client cancelled. I thought I'd just come home and rest. Her eyes searched my face, and for a moment, I saw something else there. Something calculating and sharp. Beneath a veneer of concern, it was the look of a strategist reassessing the board. Then, it was gone, replaced by gentle worry. She placed a cool hand on my forehead. "You don't have a fever. Maybe it's just stress. You've been working so hard." She guided me to the sofa, her touch both a comfort and a threat. She sat beside me, her body leaning into mine, a perfect imitation of intimacy. "Let me make you some tea." As she walked to the kitchen, her hips swaying in that familiar, graceful way, I watched her. I was no longer looking at my girlfriend. I was looking at a stranger in my home. A woman whose entire life was a carefully constructed lie. The paranoia I had been gaslit into suppressing was now my only guide, a flickering candle in a vast, dark room. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had to find the truth, no matter how terrifying it was. The voicemail was the first piece. The laptop was the second, and I was beginning to suspect the storage unit she mentioned was the final, terrible answer. The tea she made was chamomile, steeped for exactly 3 minutes, just the way I liked it. She brought it to me in the mug she'd bought on our trip to the coast, the one with the slightly lopsided handle. Every gesture was a perfect echo of our life together, a performance of such meticulous detail that it was more terrifying than any overt threat. She sat beside me, not touching, giving me space, the picture of patient concern. "You're quiet tonight," she murmured, her voice a soft caress. "Did something happen at the studio?" "A difficult client." I shook my head, focusing on the steam rising from the mug. "No, just tired." The lie was a shield, but I could feel her gaze on me. Analytical. She was probing, searching for the crack in my composure. For months she had been the architect of my reality, and now that I was secretly rebuilding its foundations, she could sense the shift in the structure. "Okay," she said, her tone light, dismissive. She picked up a book from the side table, a novel she'd been reading for weeks, its spine perfectly uncreased. She opened it, but I knew she wasn't really reading. She was listening, waiting. I needed to get away from her, to have a space to think without her disorienting presence. "I think I'll turn in early," I said, placing the half-finished tea on the coaster. "The headache is getting worse." A flicker of something annoyance? Impatience? Crossed her features before being smoothed over with sympathy. "Of course, poor thing. Go rest. I'll be in soon." In the bedroom, the air was thick with the scent of her jasmine perfume and the clean, soapy smell of her skin. It was a smell that had once meant safety, comfort. Now it was the smell of a trap. I lay on my side of the bed, facing away from the door, my body rigid. I heard her move through the apartment, the soft pad of her feet on the hardwood, the click of the laptop closing, the gentle hum as she set the security system. Our nightly ritual. A system she controlled. When she finally slipped into bed beside me, the mattress dipped. She curled against my back, her arm draping over my waist. Her breathing evened out within minutes, a slow, rhythmic sound that was supposed to be soothing. But I lay awake, every nerve ending alight, feeling the warmth of her body against mine, and feeling nothing but a profound, chilling cold. The woman holding me was a stranger. The woman who spoke to Mark about a clean storage unit. The woman named Eleanor. Sleep was impossible. The darkness of the room was populated by the ghosts of her lies. The scar on her wrist. The Chicago resume. The voicemail. The pieces were there, scattered and jagged, but I couldn't see the whole picture. I needed the storage unit. It was the one concrete thing, the one location she had mentioned in that unguarded, real moment. It was the thread I had to pull. I waited until her breathing deepened into the true heavy rhythm of sleep. Then, with the infinite care of a bomb disposal expert, I slid from the bed. The floor was cold. I gathered my clothes from the chair in the dark, dressing in the bathroom with the door closed, no light. My phone was in my pocket, my wallet. I slipped my feet into my shoes without tying the laces. The apartment door was the biggest risk. The deadbolt made a distinct, loud click. I turned it as slowly as possible, the metal grinding with agonizing slowness, the latch disengaged with a soft final thud. I opened the door a crack, wide enough to slip through, and closed it with equal care, letting the latch catch without pushing it fully home. No click. Out in the hallway, under the dim, buzzing light, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The air was stale, tasting of dust and old cooking smells. I took the stairs, not the elevator, wanting no record of my exit. The city night was damp and cold, the rain having stopped but leaving everything slick and gleaming under the streetlights. The first thing I did was walk 4 blocks to a 24-hour diner, the kind with fluorescent lights and cracked vinyl booths. I ordered a black coffee I didn't want and took it to a corner booth, my back to the wall. Then I took out my phone. I had the voicemail. I had played it a dozen times in my head, but I played it again now. Through my headphones, the world outside the diner fading away. The man's voice, Mark, his urgency. We can't afford another slip-up. She's good at disappearing, but I know her tells. And then Chloe, Eleanor. The storage unit is clean. No one will find it. Just handle your end. The casual authority in her voice. The chilling competence. A storage unit. In a city this big, there were hundreds, maybe thousands. How could I possibly find it? I had no address, no company name. I had only the context of the call. They were talking about something they needed to keep hidden. A package. A slip-up. This wasn't just a secret. It was something dangerous. I opened the browser on my phone. I started searching for storage facilities in the city, but it was a useless, overwhelming task. I needed a different approach. I thought about Chloe's Eleanor's habits. She was meticulous. She would choose a place that was secure, anonymous, but also convenient. She wouldn't drive an hour out of her way. She'd want it to be accessible, maybe even on her way to or from something else. A place she could visit without it being a major detour in her fabricated life. I thought about the things she did. Her yoga class was on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Her book club was on the first Monday of the month. Her volunteering at the animal shelter was every other Saturday morning. These were her alibis, the pillars of her fake life. I pulled up a map on my phone. I plotted the locations of these places. The yoga studio was downtown. The book club was in a residential neighborhood on the north side. The animal shelter was in a semi-industrial area on the west side. I looked at the map, connecting the dots. In the center of these 3 points, there was a stretch of warehouses and light industrial parks. It was a zone of anonymity, full of businesses that operated at odd hours, places where a car coming and going wouldn't be noticed. It was a perfect place to hide something. I finished my coffee and left the diner. I walked to the nearest car rental agency, a 24-hour kiosk at a budget hotel. I paid for a compact car with a credit card that had a limit I couldn't afford to max out. The car was small, grey, and utterly unremarkable. Perfect. I drove into the industrial zone. The streets were wide and empty, lined with low-slung warehouses and fenced-in lots. The air smelled of ozone and diesel. I drove slowly, my eyes scanning for signs. U-Haul. Public storage. Extra space. The big corporate names. But Chloe was smart. She wouldn't use a place with a national database and security cameras at every entrance. She'd use a smaller, local place. Then I saw it. Tucked between a metal fabrication shop and a distribution center was a single-story building with a simple hand-painted sign. A1 self-storage. No logos, no website listed on the sign, just a phone number with a local area code. It had a chain-link fence around the perimeter and a single roll-up gate with a keypad. It looked old, forgotten, and perfect. I parked across the street, in the shadow of a larger truck, and killed the engine. I watched the facility for a long time. A single light burned over the office door, which was dark and shuttered. Most of the unit doors were down, metal mouths closed on the secrets of 100 strangers. A car drove past once, its headlights sweeping over the lot before disappearing, otherwise nothing. I needed a way in. The keypad on the gate was a simple 4-digit code. Brute forcing it would take forever and likely trigger an alarm. I couldn't call and ask for access. My only hope was that Chloe had been careless, or that there was a vulnerability. I got out of the car and walked casually toward the fence, as if I belonged there. I pulled at the chain link, testing its strength. It was solid. I walked the perimeter. The back of the property was bordered by a row of tall, overgrown shrubs. Behind the shrubs, the fence was older here, the links rusted. As I pushed through the bushes, I saw it. A section of the fence had been cut and then clumsily repaired with wire. It was old, the repair likely done by the previous tenant, but it was a weakness. I pulled the wires apart, the metal screeching softly, and slipped through the gap, my jacket snagging on a thorn. I was in. The lot was vast and silent, a concrete desert. The air was cold. I moved between the rows of units, staying in the shadows. I had no idea which one was hers. There were hundreds. I needed a clue. I pulled out my phone again, my thumb hovering over her contact. I couldn't call her, but I could look at her information. I scrolled through her photos, not looking at her face, but at the backgrounds. A picture from a picnic last month. The edge of a corrugated metal wall was visible behind her. A picture of her with a friend I'd never met, taken at a street fair. In the reflection of a shop window behind them, I could just make out the distinct angular roofline of a warehouse. It was a long shot, but it was something. I started looking for units with that same roofline, on the side of the building that got the afternoon sun. I walked the rows, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I passed unit after unit, their doors sealed shut. The numbers on the doors were painted in faded black. 112, 113, 114. I was getting further from the office into the older, less maintained section of the facility. Then I saw it. Unit 247. The door was a newer model than the others, a heavy-duty roll-up with a heavy padlock. But it was the location that caught my eye. It was on the end of a row, tucked against the back fence, far from the office and the main gate. It was the kind of unit you'd choose if you wanted to be invisible. I knelt down, my heart pounding. The lock was a commercial-grade padlock, thick and solid. I had no tools, no way to break it. But as my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I saw something else. Tucked into the corner of the door, almost invisible against the dark metal, was a small modern keypad. It was a secondary lock, a digital one, and it was glowing with a faint green standby light. This was it. This was hers. The digital lock meant she could access it without a key, with a code she could change at will. I stared at the keypad, my mind racing. I had to guess the code. What would she use? A birthday? An anniversary? The date we met? No, she wouldn't use something so personal, so tied to a fabricated life with me. This was Eleanor's lock, not Chloe's. What would Eleanor use? I thought about the voicemail, the package, the slip-up, the past she was running from. What was the one number that defined her secret life? The number she would never forget. The one that was a constant, nagging reminder of who she really was. I thought about the scar on her wrist, a surgical incision. What kind of surgery? An appendectomy? A wisdom tooth removal? Or something else? Something that left a neat, precise line. I closed my eyes, trying to remember every detail of that scar. It was on the inside of her left wrist, about 1 inch long. It was pale, almost white, old. Not from a childhood fall. It was too clean. It was from a procedure, a medical procedure. And I remembered, with a sudden chilling clarity, a conversation from months ago. We were watching a movie, and a character had a medical bracelet on. Chloe had laughed, a brittle, sharp sound. God, I'd hate to have one of those. A permanent label, a barcode for your body. A barcode. A number. I thought about the resume I'd seen on her laptop, for Eleanor Reed, the marketing executive. The employee ID number listed at the bottom of her last job. It was a string of 7 digits. I had only glanced at it, but the pattern was familiar. It looked like a date, 081419, and a random digit, August 14th, 2019. A significant date for Eleanor, maybe the day she started that job, or the day she left it, the day she became someone else. I typed 081419 into the keypad. A red light flashed. Error. My breath hitched. I was out of ideas. I was about to give up, to slip back through the fence and drive away, defeated. But then I thought about the voicemail again. Mark's voice. We can't afford another slip-up. What if the slip-up was the reason she had the scar? What if the date on the resume was the day of the slip-up? I needed another number. The employee ID had a 7th digit. I had no idea what it was. I tried 081 4190, red light. 0 to 141, red light. I went through the digits, my thumb moving with frantic speed. 0810192, red light. 0814193, red light. 0814194, red light. 0814195, red light. 0814196, red light. 0814197, red light. 0814198, red light. 0814119, red light. I slumped back, the cold of the concrete seeping through my jeans. It was over. I couldn't get in. I had to go home, face her, and pretend I knew nothing. The thought was unbearable. Then, a new idea, a desperate, illogical one. What if the number wasn't from the resume? What if it was from her real life, the one before Eleanor, the life Mark knew? What if it was the date of her first sin, the day she became the woman who ran? I thought about the scar again, a surgical incision. What if it wasn't a surgery? What if it was an injury? A cut from a weapon? A wound from a fight? The date would be the day it happened. I had no idea what that date could be, but I had one other number, the voicemail. It was a digital recording. The phone system would have a timestamp. I pulled up the voicemail details on my phone. The call had come in at 3:17 p.m. on Tuesday. The date was October 26th. It was a wild guess, a shot in the dark. I typed 102617 into the keypad. The red light flashed. Error. My hope died. I was about to turn and leave when I noticed the keypad had a star key. Maybe it needed a specific format. I tried again, my fingers trembling. 102617. Nothing. I tried 102617. Nothing. I was out of options. I stood up, my legs stiff. As I turned, my foot kicked something in the dirt. A small flat piece of plastic. I bent down and picked it up. It was a key fob, the kind that unlocks a car. But it was blank, no buttons. On the back, in tiny laser-etched letters, was a number. 071114. It was a date, July 11th, 2014. It meant nothing to me, but it was a number, a code. Maybe it was a backup, in case the keypad failed. I took the fob to the keypad and pressed the numbers. 07114. The green light turned solid. A loud, electronic beep echoed through the silent facility, and with a heavy clunk, the padlock on the door disengaged. The roll-up door was now unlocked. My heart was a jackhammer in my chest. I grabbed the bottom of the door and heaved it upward. The metal groaned in protest, the sound deafening in the silence. I expected an alarm to blare, for lights to flood the yard. Nothing happened. The door slid up, revealing a dark, rectangular space inside. The air that wafted out was stale, smelling of dust and something else, the faint metallic scent of old blood and gun oil. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it into the darkness. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a scene that made my blood run cold. The unit was small, but it was meticulously organized. On the left side, there was a single black duffel bag, zipped closed. On the right, a small metal footlocker. On the floor in the back, a folded set of clothes, a dark jacket and pants, and a pair of sturdy boots. They were not Chloe's clothes. They were practical, severe, and worn. I stepped inside, my shoes crunching on the gritty floor. I approached the footlocker first. It was unlocked. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in foam cutouts, were items that made no sense in the context of the woman I knew. A stack of passports, each with a different name and photo, all of her. A driver's license for a Maria Santos from Texas. A credit card for a Sarah Jenkins from Washington. A wad of cash, hundreds of dollars in 20s and 50s. And at the bottom, a single small caliber pistol, sleek and black with a silencer attached. I recoiled, stumbling back, my light shaking. This wasn't just a secret. This was a life of crime, of violence. The woman who loved jasmine tea and cashmere throws was also this person. My light fell on the duffel bag. I unzipped it. It was filled with clothes, but not the ones she wore in our apartment. These were tactical, functional, and at the bottom, wrapped in an oil-stained cloth, was a small silver object. I lifted it out. It was a key, an old, ornate skeleton key, made of heavy iron. It looked like something from a 100-year-old house. Tied to it with a piece of twine was a small laminated card. On the card was a photograph of a man. He was older, with a hard face and cold eyes, and beneath the photo a name, Mark. I was holding the key to Mark's world, the key to the past she was running from. A sudden, sharp beam of light sliced through the darkness from the entrance of the unit. I froze, my heart seizing in my chest. The lighter was from a flashlight, held by a figure silhouetted in the doorway. "I knew you'd be trouble, Leo," a voice said. It was Chloe's voice. But it wasn't. It was colder, flatter, stripped of all warmth and performance. It was the voice from the voicemail. "I told you not to go looking for things you don't understand." She took a step into the unit, her face illuminated by the beam of her flashlight. She was wearing the dark jacket and pants from the floor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail. In her other hand, she wasn't holding a phone or a book. She was holding the pistol from the footlocker, its silencer gleaming in the low light. "And now," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you found the one thing I can't let you leave with." The door to the storage unit slammed shut behind her, plunging us into a darkness broken only by the two flashlight beams, crossing like swords in the dusty air. The game was over. The paranoia was justified, and I was trapped in a box with a woman I never knew, holding a key to a past that was about to become my present. The click of the lock on the storage unit door was the sound of a tomb ceiling. It echoed in the sudden, heavy silence, a final, metallic punctuation mark at the end of our shared life. The darkness that enveloped us was absolute, broken only by the two flashlight beams. Hers was steady, a hard, white circle pinned to my chest. Mine was shaking, dancing wildly across the concrete floor, the metal footlocker, the black duffel bag. My hand, the one holding the key with Mark's photograph, was trembling so violently that the old iron felt like it was buzzing with a life of its own. "Drop it," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the musicality I knew, the soft cadence that had lulled me to sleep. This was a voice honed in boardrooms and back alleys, a voice that gave orders and expected them to be followed. The pistol in her other hand was an extension of that voice, a dark, silent promise. I couldn't seem to make my fingers obey. The key was proof. It was the anchor in this swirling vortex of horror. Letting it go felt like letting go of the last piece of solid ground. Her flashlight beam moved from my chest to my hand. "The key, Leo. Drop it." Now I let it fall. It hit the concrete with a dull, graceless clatter, the sound swallowed by the thick, dusty air. The little laminated card with Mark's face skittered away, coming to rest near the footlocker. His hard, cold eyes stared up at me from the floor. She didn't take her eyes or the light off me. "Kick it over here." I nudged it with the toe of my shoe, the movement clumsy and stiff. The key slid across the rough floor and stopped a few feet from her boots. She didn't bend to pick it up. She didn't need to. It was neutralized. I was neutralized. "Now, turn off your light," she commanded. My thumb found the button on my phone, and the beam died, plunging my side of the small space into near total blackness. The world shrank to the single blinding circle of her flashlight, a spotlight on a condemned man. My eyes, struggling to adjust, could just make out her silhouette behind the light, compact, controlled, utterly without the fluid grace of Chloe. This was a different kind of predator. "You have no idea what you've done," she said, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than cold control entered her voice. It was a raw, serrated edge of fury. "You couldn't just trust me. You couldn't just accept the good things we had. You had to pick at the scab. You had to dig." "You lied to me," I whispered, the words feeling thin and useless in the face of the gun. "About everything." A humorless, brittle sound that might have been a laugh escaped her. "People lie, Leo. It's the currency of the world. I gave you a beautiful life. A clean slate. I was careful. I was kind. I built a world for you, for us, and you set fire to it because you heard a ghost on a voicemail. The sheer breathtaking arrogance of it stole my breath. She was framing it as a gift. Her deception as an act of generosity. The gaslighting had evolved from psychological manipulation to a justification at gunpoint. "The package," I said. my voice gaining a sliver of strength from the sheer absurdity of her self-righteousness. The storage unit, the passports, the gun, the man named Mark. That's not a beautiful life. That's a nightmare. Her light shifted, and for a second I thought she was going to shoot. I flinched, my entire body tensing for the impact. But she only angled the beam down, illuminating the pistol in her hand as if she were admiring it. This is a tool. Just like the passports, just like this unit. They're tools to build a life. My life. A life I chose. You were just a pleasant addition to the furniture. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. They landed like physical blows, hollowing me out. The love I'd felt, the future I'd planned, it was all just decoration in our house of cards. My survival instinct, buried under layers of shock and betrayal, began to scream. I couldn't reason with her. I couldn't appeal to her. The woman I loved was a mask, and the person wearing it was holding a gun. You killed someone, I stated, my voice flat. It wasn't a question. It was the only thing that explained the gun, the cash, the running, the scar on her wrist, the slip up. Her silence was my answer. The beam of her light wavered for a fraction of a second. A crack in the marble facade. It was self-defense, she said, her voice tight. Mark's business partner. He was going to kill me. He came at me with a knife. I was just a kid, Leo. An accountant, caught in the middle of something I didn't understand. I did what I had to do to survive. Mark helped me disappear. He set me up with a new identity. Eleanor Reed was his creation, his investment. The story spilled out of her, a torrent of justification. It was plausible. It was almost sympathetic. A young woman, trapped, forced to kill to live. But it didn't fit the cold competence of the woman in front of me. It didn't explain the multiple passports, the wad of cash, the life of meticulous lies she was living now, years later. And then what? I pressed, my mind racing, looking for an opening, a distraction, anything. You just decided to keep running, to become Chloe? Eleanor got too complicated, she said, a flicker of annoyance in her tone. Too many ties, too much history. Mark's business associates are persistent. They have long memories. I needed to be someone new, someone untraceable. Chloe was an artist, a blank canvas. She had no family, no history. She was perfect. She took a step closer, the light moving back to my face, blinding me. And you were perfect for her. Stable. Kind. So eager to believe in the good in people. You made it easy to be Chloe. The condescension was a physical weight. I was a Mark, a tool she'd used to flesh out her character. My entire existence in her life was a performance note. The rage that had been simmering under the shock began to boil, hot and potent. It cut through the fear. So Mark is what, your handler? I asked, trying to keep her talking. The longer she talked, the longer I lived. The one who provides the new identities. The one you call when you have a problem. Mark is complicated, she said. And for the first time, I heard a note of genuine conflict in her voice. Not fear, but something like resentment. He thinks he owns me, because he saved me. He thinks he can call on me whenever he has a problem that needs a delicate touch. That voicemail you heard, he was bringing me back in. A job. I told him I was out. I told him I was done. And the package? I asked, my eyes trying to pierce the glare of the light to read her expression. Something he needs to disappear, she said dismissively. It's always something. She was standing less than 10 feet away now. The space was so small. The air was thick with the smell of dust and her jasmine perfume, a sickeningly sweet miasma. I was backed against the rear wall of the unit, the cold metal pressing through my jacket. The duffel bag was to my left, the footlocker to my right. There was nowhere to go. You can't just let me go, I said, stating the inevitable. I know everything now. I know about Eleanor. I know about Mark. I know what you did. I know, she said, and the cold finality in her voice was more terrifying than any threat. I liked you, Leo. I really did. It's a shame she raised the pistol, the movement smooth and practiced. She was going to do it. She was going to shoot me, leave me here in this box with her secrets, and walk away. She'd be Chloe again by morning, making tea in my kitchen. My life didn't flash before my eyes. My mind went utterly, terrifyingly blank, and in that blankness, an instinct took over. An animal instinct. My eyes, no longer focused on the blinding light, darted to the floor, to the key. The iron key. It was heavy. It was solid. As her finger tightened on the trigger, I dropped. I didn't think, I just moved, throwing myself to the concrete. My left hand shot out, grabbing the heavy iron key. The pistol fired. The sound in the enclosed space was apocalyptic, a deafening crack that was amplified and distorted by the metal walls, a physical concussion that punched the air from my lungs. At the same time, the world erupted in a shower of sparks as the bullet ricocheted off the metal footlocker right next to my head, a high-pitched zing that was lost in the overwhelming roar. I didn't have time to be deafened or blinded. I was already moving. I swung my arm in a wild, desperate arc, the heavy key clutched in my fist. It wasn't a punch, it was a flail. The iron connected with something solid and fleshy, her leg, I think. She grunted, a sharp, surprised sound. The flashlight beam, which had been fixed on the spot where I'd been standing, whipped wildly, illuminating a chaotic dance of dust motes. Her balance faltered. I didn't wait. I scrambled forward, still on my hands and knees, and slammed my shoulder into her knees. It was a clumsy, desperate tackle. She went down with a cry of fury, the pistol discharging again as she fell, the bullet punching a hole in the corrugated metal door with a deafening shriek. We were a tangle of limbs on the grimy floor. The flashlight skittered away, its beam now pointing at the ceiling, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed like demons. The only light was the faint green glow of the keypad on the door. I could feel her, not the soft woman I held at night, but a bundle of hard, wiry muscle and frantic energy. Her elbow slammed into my ribs, knocking the wind out of me. Her fingers, strong and sharp, clawed at my face, seeking my eyes. I brought the key down again, not aiming, just striking. It hit something metal. The gun, maybe. There was a clatter and a curse. I lunged for the sound, my hands searching in the dark, finding her wrist. It was small, but it was like grabbing a steel bar. She twisted, trying to bring the gun to bear on me. My other hand found her throat. It was a primal, ugly move, but I didn't have time for honor. I squeezed, my thumb pressing into the soft hollow beneath her jaw. She gagged, her body bucking beneath me. The pressure on my face from her fingers eased for a second. It was all I needed. I shifted my weight, pinning her gun arm with my knee, and drove my forehead down into the space where I imagined her nose would be. There was a sickening crunch. She screamed, a raw, high-pitched sound of pain that was lost in the metallic echo of the unit. The gun went off again. The muzzle flashed a blinding white star an inch from my face. The bullet tore through the sleeve of my jacket, a hot line of fire along my arm. The smell of burnt fabric and cordite filled my nose. I ignored it. I was no longer Leo, the trusting boyfriend. I was just a creature fighting to live. I hit her again. A clumsy, brutal punch with my free hand. And again. Her struggles weakened. The fight was draining out of her, replaced by a choking, gurgling sound. My grip on her throat was too tight. I could feel her pulse fluttering against my thumb, a frantic, trapped bird. And then, through the cacophony of our struggle, a new sound, a faint, rhythmic thumping from outside. Thump, thump, thump. It took a second for my adrenaline-soaked brain to place it. Someone was at the gate. Someone was rattling it, trying to get in. Police. "Open up!" a voice shouted, muffled by the metal walls. "We have reports of a gunshot." Mark. He must have called them. Or someone else had heard the shots. It didn't matter. They were here. The sound broke the spell of my rage. I looked down at the woman beneath me. Her face was a pale, bloody mask in the gloom, her eyes wide with a mixture of pain and shock. The gun was still in her hand, but her grip was slack. I pried it from her fingers, the metal slick with sweat. I threw it into the darkness. I rolled off her, gasping for air, my body screaming in protest. My arm was on fire where the bullet had grazed it. I scrambled to the door, my hands fumbling for the keypad. I punched in the code, 07114, and the lock disengaged with a soft beep. I heaved the door upward. The night air, cold and clean, rushed in, a shocking relief after the stale, violent atmosphere of the unit. The bright white light of a police cruiser's spotlight flooded the space, pinning me in its glare. I threw my hands up, shielding my eyes. 2 officers stood behind the car doors, their weapons drawn. "On the ground. Now!" one of them yelled. I didn't need to be told. I dropped to my knees on the concrete, my body trembling uncontrollably. I pointed a shaking finger back into the storage unit. "She's in there," I croaked, my voice raw. "She has a gun. It's dangerous." His flashlight beam sweeping the interior. I heard him gasp. "Dispatch, we have a female party down. Possible GSW to the shoulder. Send EMS." I looked back. In the stark white light, I could see her. She was lying where I'd left her, a dark pool spreading from beneath her shoulder. The bullet from her own gun, fired wildly as she fell, must have hit her. There was no sign of the pistol I'd thrown away. She must have kicked it deeper into the shadows. Her eyes were open, fixed on me. There was no love there, no regret. Only a cold, bottomless hatred. She had made her choice. If she couldn't have her new life, she would make sure I didn't survive the old one. The officer's voice crackled on his radio. "We have the caller on the line. Says his name is Mark. He's at the gate. Claims he was tracking his stolen property." I closed my eyes. The key, the passports, the gun, his property. It was all coming together, just not in a way that would ever feel like justice. They cuffed me, not with malice, but with procedure. My arm was bleeding, my face was throbbing, my knuckles were raw. They sat me in the back of the cruiser, the cage separating me from the world. They brought her out on a stretcher, an oxygen mask on her face, her hands cuffed to the rails. As they wheeled her past my car, her eyes found mine through the window. She held my gaze for a long second. Then, she smiled. It was a small, bloody, triumphant smile. It said, "This isn't over." The ambulance pulled away, its siren wailing, taking Chloe or Eleanor or Maria or whatever her name was, back into a world where she could still be a threat. Mark was being questioned by another officer, his face a mask of fury and concern. He glanced at me, and I saw the same cold calculation in his eyes that I had seen in hers. He was a part of her world, and now, so was I. I was taken to the station. I told them everything. The voicemail, the resume, the storage unit, the gun. I gave them the key. They took my clothes as evidence. They photographed my wounds. A kind-faced detective brought me coffee and listened for hours as my life with her spilled out in a disjointed, horrified torrent. He didn't look surprised. He just nodded, making notes. The sun was rising by the time they let me go. I was a free man, but I felt like a ghost. They gave me a case number and a card with the detective's name. They told me not to leave the city. I walked out of the police station into the cold, grey morning light. The city was waking up, indifferent to the fact that my world had ended. I had no wallet, no phone, no keys. They were all evidence. I had the clothes I'd worn to the studio yesterday, now torn and stained with my blood and hers. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. Away from the station, away from the industrial park, away from the life that had been a lie. Every step was an effort. Every passing car, every person on the street, I looked at them with a new kind of fear. The paranoia hadn't been a sickness. It had been a warning, and I had ignored it until it was almost too late. I walked for an hour, my mind a wasteland of shattered images. Her smile, the gun, the smell of jasmine and cordite, the key, the look in her eyes as they wheeled her away. I found myself on a bridge overlooking the river, the water below a churning muddy grey. The city skyline was a jagged silhouette against the dawn. I leaned against the railing, my body aching, my soul hollowed out. I had survived, but I had lost everything. The woman I loved was a monster. The man I was, the trusting, happy man, was dead. I was alone, and I was haunted. The truth hadn't set me free. It had just shown me the bars of a different cage. The cold of the steel railing seeped through the thin fabric of my jacket, a final, grounding sensation in a world that had dissolved into a nightmare of shifting faces and whispered lies. The river below churned, a muddy, indifferent grey that promised a cold, quiet end. For a moment, the idea was seductive. A final escape from the wreckage of my life, from the ghost of Chloe's smile and the phantom weight of the key in my pocket. But the memory of her eyes, hard and triumphant even in pain, burned away the temptation. To die would be to let her win, to grant her the final victory in a war I hadn't even known I was fighting. I pushed myself away from the railing, my body protesting every movement. The city was waking up, and I was a ghost in its morning light. A man with no name, no home, no past that felt real anymore. I found a bus stop with a bench and sat, the metal cold against my legs. My mind, a battlefield of shock and adrenaline, finally began to settle, and the detective's words from the station echoed in the quiet. "Stay in the city. We'll need you for the trial." Trial. The word felt alien, a piece of someone else's life. There would be a trial. Mark would be there. He would be there. They would tell their stories, and the truth would be dissected by lawyers, reduced to a series of events on a timeline. My love, my trust, my life with her. It would all be evidence, filed and catalogued. I needed clothes. I needed my phone. My wallet. But the thought of returning to the apartment, to the stage set of our life, was unbearable. The air there would still smell of her. Her ghost would be in every room, a perfect smiling spectre of everything I'd lost. No, that life was a crime scene, and I was a witness who had finally seen the truth. I couldn't go back. Using the last few coins I found in my pocket, I bought a coffee from a corner cart, the steam rising to meet the cold morning air. The bitter warmth was a small, real thing in a world of lies. I sat on a public bench, nursing it, and watched the city move around me. People with briefcases, people with strollers, people with headphones, all moving with purpose, all with their own simple, verifiable lives. A profound, aching loneliness washed over me. I had been one of them. Just a week ago. Now I was an outsider, a man who knew that the most perfect life could be a meticulously crafted illusion. My thoughts turned to Mark. His voice on the voicemail had been urgent, professional. "We can't afford another slip-up." He wasn't a spurned lover. He was a business associate, a partner she had called him, not the other way around. She had gone to the storage unit to meet him, to finalize the package. My arrival had been the slip-up. I was the variable that had sent her carefully balanced world crashing down. What was in the package? The question gnawed at me. It wasn't my business. It had never been my business. It was the business of Eleanor Reed and Mark, of Maria Santos and the man with the cold eyes. It was the business of the woman with the gun and the multiple passports. My business was survival. My business was rebuilding a reality on a foundation of my own choosing, for the first time. A city bus rumbled to a stop in front of me. The doors hissed open. On impulse, I stood up and stepped inside. I paid with the last of my change and took a seat by the window, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood slide by, each block a memory I was now forced to re-evaluate. The cafe where we'd had our first date, the park where she pretended to be a dog walker, a story I'd found charmingly eccentric, the bookstore where she'd recommended a novel, her taste in literature now suspect. Every shared moment was tainted, a beautiful painting with a grotesque hidden layer. I wasn't just mourning the woman. I was mourning the man who had loved her, the fool who had been so blissfully unaware. The bus took me to the edge of the city, to a district of older warehouses and brick loft buildings, a place I'd never visited with her. It was a place of beginnings, not endings. I got off at a random stop and started walking. The streets were wider here, the air cleaner. I found a small independent hotel, the kind with a faded awning and a lobby that smelled of lemon polish and old paper. I paid for a single night with a credit card that miraculously still had a few $100s of available credit, a small mercy. The room was clean and spare, a bed, a desk, a window overlooking a brick wall. It was perfect. It was anonymous. I took a long, hot shower, washing away the grime of the storage unit, the dust of my old life. I watched the water swirl down the drain, carrying with it the last physical traces of her. When I emerged, wrapped in a thin towel, I felt a fraction more human. The hotel had a small business center with a computer and a printer. I sat down in front of the glowing screen, the cursor blinking on a blank page. I needed to make a list of the things I needed to do, a list of the things I had lost, a list of the truths I now had to live with. I started with the practical: call the bank, cancel the cards, change the passwords on every account I could remember, contact my family, a call I was dreading, a conversation where I would have to explain a hole in my life, a girlfriend who never existed. I would have to file a report for my stolen wallet and phone. I would have to find a new apartment, a new life. As I typed, the reality of my situation began to sink in. My name was on the lease for our apartment. My name was on the utility bills. My name was on the credit card we used for groceries and dinners out. My life was inextricably tangled with the fiction she had built. Untangling it would be a long, painful process. It was the slow, bureaucratic aftermath of a personal explosion. But there was another, more urgent task. I opened a new browser window and typed in the name from the resume, Eleanor Reed Chicago. The search results were immediate. A LinkedIn profile, a company website, an old news article about a marketing award she had won. It was all there, a digital ghost of the woman she had been. The photo was the one from the resume. The severe haircut, the smile that didn't reach her eyes. I stared at it, trying to find a trace of Chloe, but there was none. It was a different person entirely. I dug deeper. I searched for the company she had worked for, a large financial firm. I found a press release from 5 years ago. Eleanor Reed, a key member of our accounting team, has been transferred to a new project effective immediately. We wish her the best in her future endeavors. The date of the press release was July 12, 2014, the day after the date on the key fob. July 11, 2014, the day of the slip-up. I didn't need to know the details. The pieces were clicking into place. An accountant, an embezzlement maybe, a theft, a witness to a crime. Whatever it was, it had forced her to run. Mark had helped her. He had created Eleanor Reed as a cover, but she had outlived her usefulness, or he had wanted her back in the business. She had tried to become Chloe, to build a quiet, legitimate life, and I had been her anchor to that life, until I became the anchor that dragged her back under. My phone, the cheap, disposable one I'd bought at the hotel desk, buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. It was the detective. "We need you to come in. There's been a development." I took a taxi back to the station. The detective, a man named Miller, met me in the lobby. He looked tired. "She's talking," he said, without preamble, "and so is Mark. They're trying to cut deals, blaming each other. It's a mess." He led me to a small windowless room. "We found the package," he said, placing a plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside was a small encrypted hard drive. Mark was supposed to deliver it to a third party. Financial data. A lot of it. Stolen. She was the one who'd lifted it from her old company before she left. He was her insurance policy. He held the drive, and she was the only one who knew the encryption key. A perfect, symbiotic relationship built on mutual distrust. It was so simple, so banal. Not a crime of passion, but of greed. A cold, calculated theft that had spiraled into a life on the run. A life that had, for a brief time, included me. "She's giving us Mark," Miller continued, "and he's giving us her. They're both going down. The gun, the passports, the stolen data. It's an open and shut case. The only question is who gets the longer sentence." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "She asked to see you." My blood ran cold. "No. She said she has something of yours she wants to return personally. A peace offering, she called it." I knew what it was. My phone, my wallet, the props of my old life. The thought of seeing her again, of looking into those eyes, was a physical revulsion. But I also knew I couldn't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for a ghost to appear. I needed a final, definitive end. I followed him to the visitor's room. It was a different room this time, with a thick pane of glass separating the two sides. I sat in a hard plastic chair. A few minutes later, she was led in. She was wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. Her hair was loose, and a bandage covered the bridge of her nose. The cuts and bruises on her face were stark under the fluorescent lights. She looked small, diminished, but her eyes were the same. Cold, calculating. They found mine through the glass. She sat down and picked up the phone on her side. I did the same. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. The silence was heavy with everything unsaid. Everything that had been shattered. "You look terrible," she said, her voice a flat monotone through the receiver. "You shot at me," I replied, my own voice sounding distant. "A miscalculation," she said with a shrug. "I thought you'd stay down." I had no response to that. I just waited. She reached under the table and brought out a small, clear bag containing my wallet and my phone. She placed it on the counter in front of her. "I wanted you to have these back. It's the least I can do." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it almost made me laugh. A peace offering, as if returning my own stolen property could erase any of it. "Why?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. "Why me? You could have picked anyone. Why build a whole life with me?" She looked away for a second at the blank wall behind me. "You were safe," she said quietly. "You were kind, And you were normal. You had a simple life, a simple job. You didn't ask too many questions. You were a sanctuary. For a little while, I wanted a sanctuary. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me, and it was the cruelest. I hadn't been a partner. I had been a location, a safe house for her soul. And the voicemail? I asked. Why were you so careless? A flicker of her old, sharp anger returned. I wasn't careless. Mark was. He was supposed to call me on a secure line. He used a burner phone and called the wrong number, routed it to a public system. A 1 in a million chance. The universe has a sick sense of humor. A cosmic joke. My entire life derailed by a random number. A digital echo. Is there anything else? I asked, my voice hard. I wanted this to be over. She looked at the bag. In your wallet, there's a picture from our trip to the coast. I'd like you to keep it, but I'd like you to know that weekend was real. For me, the person I was with you for those moments, she was real too. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if it was another lie, another manipulation, or a shard of genuine truth from a woman who was no longer capable of telling a simple story. It didn't matter. I don't want it, I said, my voice firm. I don't want any of it. The money, the phone, the picture, it's all evidence. It's all part of the lie. I stood up, placing the receiver back in its cradle. I looked at her through the glass one last time. She was just a woman in an orange jumpsuit, a criminal facing a long sentence. The monster was gone, and all that was left was a broken, dangerous person. I felt nothing. No love, no hate, no pity. Just a vast, empty space where those feelings used to be. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there with my life in a plastic bag. I didn't look back. A week later, I was in a new apartment. It was a small one-bedroom on the other side of the city, in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets. The walls were bare. The rooms were empty except for a bed, a table, and a chair. It was a blank canvas. I was slowly buying new things. A set of dishes, a lamp, a coffee maker. Each purchase was a deliberate step away from the past, a small act of rebuilding. The trial was months away. The legal process was slow and grinding. Mark was pleading guilty to conspiracy and data theft. Eleanor Chloe was fighting the charges, claiming self-defense for the old murder and blaming Mark for everything else. The detective kept me updated with short, factual emails. I read them, filed them, and tried not to think about it. My life was here now, in this quiet, empty room. One evening, I was unpacking the last box from my old apartment, a box I'd had a friend retrieve for me. It was filled with books, mostly mine, but at the bottom, tucked between two novels, was a small, framed photograph I'd forgotten I owned. It was from our first anniversary. We were on a picnic blanket in the park, the city skyline behind us. I was looking at the camera, smiling a wide, genuine smile. She was looking at me, her head tilted, a soft, unreadable expression on her face. It could have been love. It could have been an artist studying her subject. I stood there for a long time, the photo in my hand. I remembered that day. The sun was warm, the wine was cold, and I had felt with absolute certainty that I was the happiest man in the world. It was a real memory, a real feeling. The fact that it was built on a foundation of lies didn't change the authenticity of my own experience. My love had been real, even if its object was not. I took the photo out of the frame. I didn't want to see her face anymore. I kept my own smiling image, a relic of a man who no longer existed. I taped it to the inside of a kitchen cabinet, a hidden piece of my own history. Then I threw the rest away, the picture of her, the empty frame. I went to the window and looked out at the city lights. The paranoia was gone. It had been burned out of me, replaced by a quiet, steady vigilance. I knew now that the world was not always what it seemed, that monsters could wear beautiful faces and speak in gentle voices. But I also knew that I could trust my own eyes, my own judgment. I had survived the lie. My phone buzzed on the table, a text from a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up, my heart giving a single hard thump before settling. It was from a colleague at the studio asking if I wanted to pick up some freelance work. A simple normal question. I typed back a simple normal answer. Yes, send me the details. I put the phone down and walked back to the window. I was alone, but for the first time in a long time, I was not lonely.